Hello, viewers. My name is Adam.
And I'm here.
This is Sicky Media Productions.
Well, the day has finally come.
No more Star Wars.
Nope.
Not for us, anyway.
For the most part, I'm done. I'm not interested in any more movies. I'm not probably going to watch any more animated series. Or, maybe I don't know. But definitely I'm done with the movies as far as I'm concerned of. And most likely the video games, too.
I'm done.
I mean...
Well, when we said from the Last Jedi review that Last Jedi was at least my last movie, I meant that as that was the last movie. And we also said that Rebels, because we was watching that anyway, it was luckily, thankfully, it was on its last season. And after that, I'm done. And it's finished.
Yep.
And this is our review for Star Wars Rebels.
Now, this is a series that was actually a sequel series towards the Star Wars Clone Wars animated series, and before that was the 2D animated series Clone Wars, Star Wars: The Clone Wars, which was like the first one of the 3D animated series, and that was a really nice series. It was really awesome.
That was actually on Cartoon Network. Actually, it came on 3 years after Revenge of the Sith. And the whole reason why this series existed because Disney went and just bought Lucasfilms, and as soon as that happened, Cartoon Network pretty much had to stop airing it.
Because Disney always likes to play with their toys, and as soon as they get their little hands on a new IP or whatever, that they're going deep into it. And now you have Rebels, and Rebels was their first of the toys they were using to get their hands into the series, and it was a really not. And I mean, for all that all ends well, whatever. Star Wars Rebels was actually really a phenomenal animated series. I really liked it.
So this series takes place in between episodes 3 and A New Hope. Episode 4, whatever way you want to call it, is actually just the original Star Wars movie. But
it centers around a young, force-sensitive child by the name of Ezra Bridger. Yet again, where like usual Star Wars tropes, we're starting out finding our hero on a somewhat desert planet.
It's not really a desert planet. It's more vegetation than actually anything.
It has a little bit more vegetation, but at the end of the day, it's a middle of nowhere area. And this kid is like he's on his own. He's in the slumps, but one fateful day he comes across these group of rebels in a fight against the Empire.
And these Empire, they're occupying the planet of a ball.
Now, you throughout the series actually end up growing up with the character of Ezra Bridger and his new foreign family as they try and put their the hurt on the Empire. And a lot of the stories that actually come out of this series were not only some of the best writing out of the Star Wars franchise, but some of the best I've seen in animated cartoons.
Yeah. It's luckily enough that this series was actually end on its own terms. This series lasted 4 seasons. And I would say that it started off good, and then it really took off in season 2.
Definitely.
Season 3, it was this. You have to admit that it was in a slow area.
And a bit of a slow start, but at the end of the day, from what a lot of the storylines that was going on in season 3 was well worth the ride or watching it.
Yeah, the back half of it really picked up. And season 4 was basically everything coming all together. And thankfully it ended on its own terms.
I mean, but like I said, we should go back into it and actually discuss some of the characters you actually get to see in this. As first and foremost, like I said, we start off with Ezra Bridger, a young Force sensitive, ends up becoming a Jedi Knight in training. You have his Jedi Master, Kanan, who happens to be an actual character that was written into the canon of the Star Wars franchise in a series of books Kanan, I think the last Padawan.
Yes.
A phenomenal character. Played by Freddie Prinze Jr., if I'm not mistaken. I didn't know the guy had that type of talent, but definitely showed me a hell of a lot of spirit in this particular character. Then you had Sabine Wren.
Like,
She was a Mandalorian.
Yeah.
And I mean,
watch out for her storyline.
Mm-hmm.
It takes off later into the series.
In fact, you want to actually end up getting a little bit more closer look at Sabine Wren. Actually, definitely pay attention to the prior series, Clone Wars, because her storyline actually has some parts in there. Then there's Zeb, a Lasat character. He was one of the newer alien species that was brought in or introduced within the Rebels for Star Wars. Yes. He was really cool.
Yeah.
He was really awesome.
Steve Blum can do no wrong with his voice.
With any of the voices he really gives. He definitely brought a cool, but at the same time, rugged character to this guy. To Zeb. It was really cool. Mm-hmm. Of course, there's Chopper, and Star Wars wouldn't be nothing without their really cool ass droids. Yeah. Chopper is a character in and of himself. Actually, I kind of feel as though he was actually one of those the androids in these series that actually put a little bit more
edge.
Mm-hmm. You know, try to go on to that whole ideology that both me and you catch.
Droids' lives matter.
Definitely, droids' lives definitely matter.
Actually, that's like a couple of episodes where droids are actually the main characters.
Mm-hmm.
Actually take it to the forefront. Yay.
But of course, Ezra's little family wouldn't be complete without their
the motherly figure
mm-hmm.
of Hera.
Ooh, I liked Hera. Hera was really cool.
Yeah, and here's the thing. By the end of the series, when you actually start wondering just how and when the series is going to close out, if you were to watch Rogue One, which is also a movie that takes place in between 3 and 4, but it's actually basically the prologue of 4, if you want to really be real with it.
You start seeing characters like Hera and Chopper actually being introduced into those in that particular movie and into the franchise.
Yeah. So I was actually quite happy where you actually have a cinematic universe that actually acknowledges its spin-offs.
Looking at Marvel, somebody, Netflix cinematic universe mixing with I don't know, Avengers universe. I mean,
Disney,
whatever.
Disney needs to get this shit together. But here we are. We have a series and telling off episodes in which you think are standalone, but
no, they actually no episode is really wasted in Rebels. If they have an episode, it's either going into deep character development or is something that involves the greater storyline that's going to happen throughout the series
and very strong payoffs near the end.
I mean, some of the highlights in the series happen to be when Ezra actually tapping into the dark side of the Force and realizing that in the individual path within him,
and also developing his own unique path to the Force as well.
Oh, definitely.
Yes.
Then there was also Darth Vader. I mean, when they introduced that character into the series, that was definitely a high point.
James Earl Jones voicing the character.
It was awesome. I mean, you got to see him in Rogue One, but first and foremost, you got to see him in Rebels, and that was really cool.
And also, because the series acts as a sequel or a predecessor, or like a successor, not necessarily a sequel, but a successor to the Clone Wars, it does introduce characters that were from that series as well. And
then they also introduced yet another character from the books, a character by the name of Admiral Thrawn,
who winds up being their main villain from season 3 and onward until the series.
I love that character. That was really cool.
But the series before then actually introduced pretty adequate antagonists. And they fleshed them out. And of course, you got some characters that actually seeing both sides, and sometimes just you start seeing some grays and also some highlights that make you think, they're actually depicting Empire as an actual occupation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just some overly thread. They actually show through the economics and
that's something that Rebels actually ended up doing something very fine, very good. Their way of incorporating storytelling is done to such a fine extent that I wish they had done this in the cinematic world for Star Wars. I.e., there are some parts to this to Rebels that I wish was fleshed out even further. That within the chronological movie timeline, when they start talking about the Force, you actually get a sense of understanding behind, and not understanding that you know everything that the Force has to bring. No, that's far from the truth. But they do incorporate different aspects of the Force. Ezra alone is a character that in the series is said to have a connecting force, or it was a connecting
more
force.
Communication.
His pull towards the Force as something that is done through him feeling connection to animals and in his environment.
Yes.
That Jedi don't just have the Force. That different Jedi have different aspects of the Force that they're stronger towards. And then there's also the fractions within Mandalore that they explore with Sabine Wren, and you got to learn a little bit more about that. The Lasats was an interesting aspect. Their whole civilization.
And also coming back to the Force, you also have a different avenue of dark side users.
Mm-hmm.
From the first couple of seasons, they introduced the Inquisitors.
Oh, these were really cool characters.
Yes.
And I wish they actually had some more grounding with them too, because you had the Grand Inquisitor, and he was really cool kind of guy. He was very regal in his approach.
That can be wrong when you're being voiced by Malfoy's dad.
Ugh.
We should be talking about the production as well. Shifting towards, I don't know if this is because they shifted from Clone Wars from Cartoon Network to Disney.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing Disney thought that this series might not take off as well as it did.
Yeah, I can see where you're going with. I mean,
and from that, there is a strong.
There is a difference between the production that went into Rebels and the production value that was inside the in Clone Wars. Clone Wars felt a little bit more cinematic, especially since the
grand.
Well, I don't want to say grand because they both have grand storytelling. Is the grand in concept is one thing, and then there's grand in the I don't want to say cinematography, but the animation itself. Because Clone Wars, when Clone Wars was made, it was made after they made the Clone Wars animated movie, and then after that, they went ahead and did the television series. And they kept. I'm pretty sure they just and with that they kept the same animation style they did for the movie, and they did that with the animated series. In Clone Wars, it's made to be similar towards that same animation, but there is a little bit of a downgrade from what it was.
It's more I would say it's a little more simplistic from how they approach Clone Wars. So clearly, there's a Cartoon Network was using a bigger budget.
But even if it was that, even though that's the case, there is a definite design direction in Rebels, because what they done uniquely in Rebels is that they kind of made it mirror the effects, the concept art and the effects that was inside the original Star Wars movies. So we're talking about from episode 4 to episode 6. If you notice the lightsabers within the within Clone Wars and then also within the prequel series, you know how they're a little bit more thicker and more robust, and how in the original series 4 through 6. And in Rebels, the lightsabers are a little bit more skinnier, a little bit more wavier, and when they clash, there's a difference in colors. That's because they were mimicking the technology that was being used to make those films.
Yeah,
and it also tells a story that that you're dealing with an age that is not at its prime anymore. No. You're dealing with the aspects of the what's left over.
Basically. And it's actually quite great how well they were paying attention to detail on that part.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, going back to the difference in music, and production.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I like Rebels music a lot better. What they
Definitely.
did with the Clone Wars, and I liked the music better when they were doing these modern movies. Starting from Force Awakens and like onwards, because wow, I'm actually quite surprised at how cinematic they was able to make the music help boost off that production.
Which is something you should come to expect out of Star Wars. And unfortunately, I keep going back to how they're doing this now with the new current Star Wars movies. That music hasn't necessarily played that big of an aspect for them, and it's a shame that something like Rebels can do that.
And it's on a television show where I'm pretty sure not many people are watching, because it's a cartoon, and not many people will think much of a cartoon, which is very shame. It's an animated series. It's the same type of medium, actually, just on a different aesthetic.
Now, don't get me wrong. Rebels did, at the end of the day, echoed heavily from the prequel series and from the original series, but the way they did it was to its own uniqueness for the storylines of Rebels. So each character, even though they had storylines that mimicked some of the other characters throughout the series, it was told in a unique way that fit their character development.
Because they still had their own motives, personalities, their different paths. It's not really like their storylines mimic. It's the overall structure of how the series came out to be does mirror or echoes the original series, but they were able to frame it into the original storytelling that began. I'm going leaving it off as it is, and Star Wars Rebels by itself, not the Star Wars universe as a whole.
Just Rebels on its own.
I would say that this series deserves a great review for me. I will want it to have been amazing if they were to have increased the budget a lot more. Like if it was like the cinematic like Clone Wars, but still within the war-torn way how they depicted the original series.
I would agree that this is a great series. I wish there was even more to it, and they expanded further into the series with a lot of the concepts they've introduced and built upon from previous entries. But from what I've received so far, yes, this has just been a really great series.
And that's all we have to say about this. My name is Adam.
And I'm Aaron.
This has been a Sick Media Productions.